Today we're speaking with David Blazevski, President and CEO of Fresh Agricultural Technologies. Welcome to podcast, David.
Thank you, James. Nice to meet you.
Fantastic. To start with, can you tell us a little bit about Fresh Ag Tech?
Yep, sure. So Fresh Ag Tech is a brand new startup company founded a year and a half ago. So we are operating in the ag tech industry. Let's say the basic idea around the company was to create the AI agronomy consultant. So like a human agronomy consultant, we wanted to spread the knowledge to small apple growers around the world so they can have the knowledge in their pocket, what they need to do, how to spray, how to irrigate, etc. So this was the main idea, the basic idea around which company was founded. And let's say that the first MVP of our product came out with this business model in mind. This is how actually the company was incorporated around this business case.
And did you have a background in agronomy or agriculture, or where did that kind of genesis come from?
Yeah, thanks for the question, because myself, I'm the CEO of the company, but I finished economic science. Also, one of the founders, one of my friend, actually, and colleague, he's the agronomy consultant and coder or developer. So two of us decided to start up a company just because, let's say, the main reason around the question to start a company was he was receiving a lot of phone calls from apple growers here in Serbia about like, okay, now the weather is bad, what we need to do, or how much we need to irrigate or to spray, how to protect the orchard from the conditions that are happening around us. With this in mind, we decided to develop, let's say, put the knowledge and technology in combination to create a synergy in order to help the growers and to satisfy the need on the market.
And so what does that product today look like?
Yep. So the product is called Map My Apple. So Map My Apple is mobile application. We put the technology in the mobile application. It's for small and medium size apple growers. We decided to go with apple growers because the knowledge of apple growing was very easy for us to transfer to the technology. And small, medium-sized apple growers are those growers that are having, let's say, from 1 to 2 hectares of apple orchards up to 50 or more. This is the basic idea around that we were operating. But the main business case when we were raising money was also developed around plums, peach, apricots, and other fruits also, because it's kind of very interesting to develop such kind of technology. And that was like the fresh start for us. The name of my colleague is Stefan also, and two of us started like the initial idea, developing the first MVP in, let's say, drag and drop bubble software and testing on the market to see the first reaction just.
If I'm an apple farmer in Serbia and I come across your product, what are the specific kind of problems that I can use your product to solve?
Yeah, the biggest problem that we found on the market was the pesticides overdose. So, for example, if the conditions are changing, depends on different kind of variables outside, like temperature, leaf wetness, soil temperature, etc. There are some pests and disease risks that can occur. So, most of the apple growers that we were discussing with, they had the issue how to spray based on the conditions that happened around them in order to protect the orchard and the yields and the effectiveness of the growing methodology and recommendations that they were receiving from the agronomy consultants. So we decided to automate this based on the variables outside the orchard, and in the orchard also the weather conditions, technology change, etc. So for the grower, for example, it's very easy to use Map My Apple in terms of usability, because it needs to put the input data from his side about the variety, apple variety, rootstock, type of irrigation that he has, and we can connect our product to the weather station if he has one, or if he wants to buy one, or even we can put the virtual weather station in his orchard, so we can, let's say, calculate the approximation of the data from the real weather stations if they don't have one. Based on all of this information, we actually provide them the right spraying recommendation. So this was the biggest issue, because they were spraying something, but they were doing the overdose. They had maybe like 25 sprayings. And for example, last year we had some growers that we showed that they can reduce the sprayings from 25 to 16 and still have the same yields with the same apple quality, for example. This was done in, let's say, one of the parcels in the biggest apple orchard here in Western Balkans with Delta Agrar. They have 600 hectares of apples, and they use the technology to test in the smaller scale to see how it compares with the best practice of their agronomy consultants, for example. This was one of the issues. Yeah.
And when you're getting like apple grower kind of, to start using the product, like how much, what does like an implementation look like? How long does it take? And what are the steps to get them up and running?
Yep. It's actually very easy for them because they just need to, we put the mobile application, as I mentioned several times, because we wanted to make it very easy for them to use the app so they can download it from Google Play or Apple Store, create an account, register. As I mentioned, it's very easy setup because they need to provide information about the apple variety, to put the location, let's say, in terms of where the parcel is located. Based on this data, also the satellite imagery is collecting a lot of information about different kind of layers in the orchards and different kind of data that we use in order to feed the algorithm to provide the optimal spraying recommendations. I mean, based on this, let's say, basic information from the ID of the orchard, we can tell them, let's say, for example, there is the pest or disease infection possibility that can happen for 7 days upfront. So like weather forecast, but for pests and diseases in order to mitigate the agricultural risks.
And are you collecting data over, let's say, a wide region of Serbia, and then if somebody signs up, they can basically tap into that existing data set? Or if somebody signs up, you then start collecting data for their region?
It's a very good question. Also, like, because in agriculture, like the biggest issue that we found, for example, is the adjusting the product for different regions. I mean, from different kind of reasons. One is the language, definitely, and the second one is also different kind of regulations that are, I mean, different. For example, in US and Europe, or Brazil and Turkey. So we adjusted the product from the very beginning for United States apple growing market. We worked and with Cornell University in New York State with the product testing validation for their apple growers. We tested the product with five apple growers, five different orchards in New York. But also we developed the product to be aligned with all of the necessary informations and regulations for pesticides and sprayings for EU and Turkey and Brazil, because those were the markets that were very interesting for us in terms of the number of growers and also the market opportunity where the growers are located or concentrated in one, two, or several regions that we can target and test the app. For example, in Turkey last year, we had more than 250 apple growers in early beta testing. So they used the app, provided the feedback. It was free for them. They didn't pay anything, but for us, it was very good opportunity to test the product with real users and to feed the algorithm in order to be better and better.
And because you're taking both the self-reported data from the grower coupled with all this kind of external data that you're and that's, I suppose, the real value add. It's that
Yes,
combination of all these different data sets into like and making sense of that to give a very specific recommendation,
right.
spray or don't spray.
Yes, it's very like on the personal level. So it's very personalized. It's not like on the regional level, for example. So like there are, for example, in north part of Serbia, several weather stations. You connect to one of them and then you get a recommendation. It's not like that. So it's for your apple orchard. Even if we are one near to other, even if we are the neighbors, still the recommendations are very personalized on the level of your orchard based on the data collected there. So the data is what we are looking for in terms of the importance and the precision of the spraying recommendations that we are providing. More data that we collect, for example, from your orchard for soil composition, mechanical or chemical soil composition, it will be even more precise recommendation. So yes, to answer the question, the data is the added value actually for the growers in terms of the precision and increased effectiveness of the recommendations that they can use.
And are you going basically off? Are they like drawing some sort of boundary like within the app so that they can see the specific field, or are you kind of pinging off, some GPS of the signal on the phone itself?
Yes. So it's both. For example, if you don't have turned on GPS signal, then you can draw actually like like a square of your field. Or because we found out this is also like you need to educate people how to draw actually the right location of their orchard. So we put like the opportunity to just put one pin inside the map, and now we are actually discussing with this like creating a borders when you enter the map to create automatically to circle or to put the squares around the fields around you, so you can just choose what is your field. So in order to make the UX for users easily to understand and to proceed with the next step in terms of using the app and the added value for them actually to get the added value.
And what's the go-to-market kind of strategy?
Mhm.
You mentioned you have these pilots going on in a number of different countries. You have a few others, particularly
Yes.
local. It sounds like they may be paying for it. How do you get users?
Yep. So in two different ways. One is online, the other one is offline. What is maybe more important question is how you are gaining trust in order to have like a very good go-to-market strategy. So mm, we are our strategy was okay because we are new on the market. It's new technology. It's explained as a, let's say, AI agronomy consultant. So it's digital, giving recommendations. We know that people will not say no to their agronomy consultant. They will still work with them because they have trust in them. They are friends with them, etc. So what we were trying to do, and what we are also trying to do, is to onboard the agronomy consultant so they can explain also to people and to growers what are the benefits of this. So, for example, just to provide a short context, when the grower is going to his agronomy consultant and he's saying like, okay, I have some app that is giving me the pest and disease prediction 7 days up front, and then I get the recommendations for spraying combined with the data from the weather, or maybe you want to buy the weather station from us, depends. Then we have like the very straightforward feedback from the agronomy consultant who's saying, okay, this is very good because the pest and disease prediction is not something that we are seeing a lot of on the market currently. I was participating in Forbes discussion of the reshaping agriculture, and what is the future of agriculture. Still, putting the AI in the hands of the smallholder farmers is definitely something that will happen in the next 5 to 10 years. But what is the right amount of data for them is definitely what is the big question for those who want just to put the product on the market. So our go-to-market strategy was, okay, we want to target those growers, to educate them. We were doing a lot of webinars, education, in order to gain the trust, to use the technology and the product, and to explain them how this can be very beneficial for them in the future. In the first year, they are, let's say, we are giving the free trial period. They are using the app for free. If they like it, we get a lot of questions like, can I extend the free trial period? This is what happens a lot. And we had a few here and there subscriptions. So the revenue model is subscription. We got some traction with this one, but we wanted to gain trust in them in terms of recognition of the technology. So we worked with Cornel, as I mentioned. We worked here in Serbia with biggest apple growers. So the small ones can see that this is definitely something that actually can help them in the future, can increase the effectiveness of apple growing that they are doing.
So it's interesting what you say about I suppose, the feedback from the agronomy consultant, right? Because
Yes.
in some ways, maybe not right this moment, but eventually maybe you're a competitor to the agronomy consultant, right? Because you're digitizing a lot of their kind of insights. And so, it's very common with a lot of, conversion to internet type businesses where this is the case. Like the first adopters are the ones who are potentially being disrupted by the technology itself. I suppose, how do you kind of think about that balance? And have you had that feedback from any of the agronomists?
Yeah, I mean, we have had some fails there, here and there, in terms of discussing and what is the point of view. Like, okay, definitely we don't want to change the agronomy consultant. Definitely, there. I mean, in agriculture now, from my point of view, I mean, my opinion is that the agronomy consultants are the human part that people are trusting. Like, this is with the same with the doctor. For example, if I tell you that you get the app that tells you like you need to take this, you will still go to doctor and pay him just to have the human face that tells you what you need to do. So we don't want to place ourselves like, okay, you don't need a agronomy consultant, just use our app. So currently this is not the strategy. We are not changing them. We are not replacing their role in the business. Their role is definitely very important for us. And what we are doing currently is that we are working with them towards educating all other smallholder farmers, because those people are maybe having bigger awareness in terms of technology and technology use. They are using some kind of technology already. So we are learning from them as much as we can. And I believe, I mean, in our team are a few of them working with us. So definitely not replacing, because I think their role is very important and incremental to the business also. And it will be definitely, because as I mentioned, the human fact will be definitely something that people will always love to have. And this is what we are also putting in our product. Like, okay, if you need support that you don't, for example, if we tell you that you need to irrigate 60 minutes, you still want to have a human that will tell you, for example, okay, because of this and that, now you can still call us. We have support from in terms of agronomy consultant that can discuss with you. And I think this is the biggest benefit, like combination of those, of the knowledge of the agronomy consultant with the technology. This is how actually we originated from the very beginning.
And in terms of, you mentioned a couple of times, it sounds like you're generally going fairly direct, to
Mhm.
the end grower, and it's generally the small to medium. But one of the aspects of agriculture, especially when you get into the larger scale agriculture, is
Yes.
you have quite a few big monopoly players in the space. And often those, can be a challenge, right? Because either they can act as major blockers,
Mhm.
they give away a lot of free technology if you buy their chemicals and fertilizers and so on. Also, there's the opportunity of using them as channel partners for distribution. How do you think about that kind of ecosystem in terms of, potential
Yes.
distribution versus competitor channels?
Yes. I mean, this is a very important question. Like we had some, and as an example, we had a discussion with, for example, Bayer in Serbia, so or Agrofresh in US, or so. We want to be the part of the ecosystem. And we want to work with the big players like the pesticides or chemical companies. I mean, any agriculture company or company that provides services in terms of advisors or any agriculture advising. So using their for example, where we see the benefit is working with them towards distribution of the product to the small, for example, for the small farmers, because even the big companies so far, when we discussed even on the World Agritech in London 2 years ago, it was like, okay, for us it's very difficult to gain the data or to go to reach the small farmers for our products or for our services, or the to gain the trust or to increase the awareness, etc., etc., even for the technologies that they are developing. So we want to work together with them. I mean, we want to be incremental part of their business models, because I believe that it's also combined, like the ecosystem, big players, governments, startups. This is all that needs to be like integrated in terms to put the agriculture, the industry that is 2,500 years old, to go forward and to strive in more advanced technology. So in the example of the Bayer, we are working with them together. So their agronomy consultants, for example, can use the app to track what the growers of the Bayer can do. So this is, or what they need to do. So the main point for us is we don't want to put in a favor any company. We don't want to like put your pesticides before something else. So we are not going towards this model currently, but definitely can be a good potential in terms of advertising revenue or something that, I mean, any other agriculture company can do.
And you mentioned the Agritech Summit. I'm on one of their mailing lists, and I get a lot of emails from them at the moment about
Yeah,
their next
me too.
summit. What was that experience like?
I mean, we were a very young company there. I mean, from my point of view, it was like kind of early for us to be there, but it was like, I mean, maybe the best experience that I had because of the networking part. You meet a lot of people from the industry, a lot of decision makers. What I like about this one is that you have this kind of speed dating, 20 minutes round tables with them. So a lot of good feedback is provided there. I mean, for us, that shaped the future, how we worked in the future. For example, like discussing with Syngenta and their digital agronomy consultant is something that I have always in mind, speaking about the data. So in terms to develop a very good algorithm, AI or any ML for like predictions, and not just having like cognitive algorithm for detecting what already happened, you need a very good data set and a very, I mean, big or very good quality data set. So even discussing with, for example, these guys was like very good for us, because we saw that even the big companies, the big players are struggling to get this kind of information for small farmers in order to provide the precise recommendations or technology, or to put the technology in the hands of the small farmers. So in terms of feedback, networking, meeting people for the future, definitely kind of very good event. I like it. And also this kind of pitching that they have, competitions are can increase your awareness. I mean, this is what happened. We applied a few times, and I liked the event. I wanted to go to San Francisco last year, but because of the COVID-19, this didn't happen.
Yeah, no, it's always interesting when you have the very large enterprises and small
Yes.
nimble startups brought together in one space, because like the mindsets are so like radically different, right?
Yes.
When I talk to like large companies, and I'm working on a few projects of my own, and they'll say, oh, could you do that? And I'm like, yeah, yeah, like I could do it by Friday. And they're like, what do you mean you can do it by Friday? I was like, well, it's just me and two people. Like we can do something by Friday. Like we can just code it up, tear up a product, completely
Yes.
redo it. And they're like, oh, we thought you were going to say like August, or like
Yeah.
4 months from now. And because of that disconnect, like, often the product development cycle for a startup is so much faster than the decision cycle or the sales cycle
Right.
for a large enterprise. So how do you
Yeah.
think about that, balancing those things?
Yeah, I had a previous experience working for a big companies, corporate, telco industry, tobacco, and also banking software. So in terms of agility and flexibility for product development, definitely working in a startup is more flexible environment to develop a product, test it, and put it on the market, learn, get the feedback, and put it again on the loop, and improve the product or change it or pivot it. Whatever. In terms of corporation, for example, my experience is yes, you need to get approval, you need to go forward, or you don't go forward. What is the gap analysis, etc., etc. This can happen to a startup also if you have this is also happening. I saw a lot of examples with if you have a board members or advising board that is requiring from you all the time to keep them in the loop, but they are trying to lead a company, from the board seat, and not letting you to work towards product development and improving your product or changing the situation, aligning the product to the market need, etc. So my experience for a startup in terms of product development and comparing with the corporate with the big companies is definitely like in startup is more dynamic. You see more problems. You are more working with. It's maybe like sounding like very commercial, but you need to like a problem definitely, because otherwise you will be completely up. You will not go so much further in terms of putting product on the market. So I like more maybe the startup part just because you are working faster in terms of learning faster on the market. So you need to listen to the market. The point of time when you stop listening to the market, you're dead. This is, I catch myself, for example, sometimes when you are so liking your product and I forget about the market, and then you go back because some critical mass of users are telling you, okay, this is not something that we want, or I don't know, I need a diary like to track my recommendations. And for me it was like, okay, mind blowing, because this was like very simple feature, for example, for us to develop, still very very easy to put it on the market for them, and still you don't think about that in that way. In big companies, you, for example, from my experience, you have the market touch with the market, but not in that exposure like in the startup.
Makes a lot of sense. And then in terms of
Yes.
like, you started with kind of apples, what is the kind of size of the opportunity for, apple growing? And you mentioned, potentially when you were kind of talking
Mhm.
to outside capital, you were talking about these other types of fruit, et cetera. Like, are you kind of trying to conquer the apple market and then kind of move on to other forms of fruit, or are there kind of multiple lines that you could take at the same time?
Yes, I believe that, for example, from the beginning, my ideas were more focused on like apples and other fruits, but in terms of fruits, like I was working with numbers in terms of like, okay, there are 8.5 million fruit growers in the world. This is like approximate number that we got. We were reading a lot, but for example, last year was maybe changing mm, the frame that I'm operating in. Especially saying I, because I was like changed the way how I thought about the product and the company for the future. So, for example, I was operating in terms of, okay, growers, how much growers, and what is the size of the opportunity if they, for example, our subscription model is revenue. Our revenue model is subscription, so we are charging, for example, $20 per month. So if there is, for example, full potential market of, I don't know, 8.5 million growers in the world, this is creating like 2.4 billion annually potential industry or revenue for you. But then last year I realized, okay, the size of the agribusiness is quite bigger, and the serviceable market from the agribusiness side in terms of agronomy advice, is huge. It's like from 8 to 10 billion, depends on the research that you find, but like agribusiness is what we are competing actually, because you can develop similar technology for agronomy consultants that helps them to satisfy more growers with the same amount of time and more precise data. And this is the another way of thinking how you can operate on the market. So this is what we are also working on, developing not just MapMapple for growers, answering your questions from the previous part, but also developing the MapMapple for agronomy consultants. From their point of view, they can satisfy maybe not 5, but now they can satisfy 10 growers with the same precision or bigger precision, because they have the opportunity to predict pest and disease and they can write the recommendation, or they can say they wrote the recommendation, still the recommendations were automated. So this is like another opportunity. So the size of the market of this is quite bigger, for example, than just the grower looking point of view.
Yeah, and I think that what's interesting about the agronomy consultancy is that, from my understanding, at least in the United States, where I have a better sense than in Europe at least, there's a lot of kind of pressure to shift to some more regenerative practices in particular, and a lot of those kind of new, well, they're not, they've been around forever, but like in terms of their newness, in terms of the money being put up behind them, a lot of kind of existing agronomy consultants, it may not be their first go-to in terms of their skill set. And so there's definitely been this more of an appetite for new approaches to old problems. And so I guess like your approach could also kind of tap into that kind of macro trend as well.
Yes, I believe that in, for example, our experience in discussing with people in the United States, especially agronomy consultants, we had, for example, last week the meeting with John Clements, who is working in Massachusetts as a agronomy consultant in apple growing. My experience is that people are more open in terms of accepting new technologies and trying. I mean, testing even for a year. Okay, let's test it comparing with the Europe. Still, the different kind of methodology and the modernization of apple growing is different in Europe and US, which is fine. But I mean, my personal feeling is that operating, for example, in US, in terms of agronomy consultants and discussing with them, getting feedback, or having an opportunity to work together, we had more successful, let's say, completion of this task than in Europe. It was very difficult in the very beginning to explain to people what this is. And going back to your question from the beginning and your point, people are afraid. Like especially the agronomy consultants here they were very afraid in terms of, okay, how you can know what you need to do. You are just the crew of coders who put some template of plans in the technology, and now you're providing something. And this was like very difficult barrier to go upon. I mean, we discussed a lot with people, but in US we were doing some customer discovery. It was kind of easier discussing. Even, I mean, Cornell University, which is one of the projects that we've done in the last year, it came kind of not so hard in terms of getting people on board and explaining how this technology works and gaining their interest, like especially during the COVID, and leaving some projects because of the different kind of requirements and the COVID restrictions. Still, Apple was one of the projects that was kept in terms of PTAs that we signed. So in US is something that, I mean, definitely very interesting market for us in the future.
And in terms of that Cornell relationship, did you reach out to them, or they came across what you were working on and were kind of interested in doing a project together?
Yeah, I don't remember how it actually went, but I remember that I was reading, it was some science paper about prediction models in Europe that Cornell were using in terms of testing them together with the National Weather Association in United States, in New York. And it was a science paper about the results from a professor from Cornell University. Then I mean, Googling, founding the horticulture lab, and it was just an email. We have this technology. It's very interesting, and I mean, we want to do it in United States. New York was very interesting for us because it's the second biggest state in US besides Washington for apples. And we didn't want to target immediately Washington because the size of the orchards in Washington were quite bigger in that moment of time when we had the technology in our hands. What we developed in terms of product was kind of, I mean, more ambitious. And then we reached them, and actually we started discussing. Not in We didn't reach in terms of we want, I don't know, PTA, or we want to do something with you. It was like, okay, we have this. Can you look at, for example, the knowledge that we put in the algorithm and how actually this optimal algorithm works, because we put it globally for everybody can use it. And then the story started to roll out in terms of, okay, maybe we can do this together. We want to try this, and we discussed the terms that we need, like different locations, different parcels, different varieties, so we can have different kind of data in terms of I mean, representative data that you can use for analysis and the report. So with the Cornell, the story started like, okay, for us it's very good to have for the science part, and from the our side, in terms of a company, it was very good to have a Cornell as a sounding board, let's say, how this can be validated in US and how it's work actually. I mean, what is the reality there?
I think your general approach has been really like great, to be honest, because I talked to a lot of companies in the ag tech space, both through the podcast and through some other things,
Mhm.
and I think the focus on trust is really key, right? Like you have the educational side, you're talking to the agronomists and have some buy-in there, and then you have like actual buy-in from these field free trials in like Turkey, and like
Yes.
getting all of those kind of different layers of buy-in. I'm sure you'll be publishing stuff down the road, like all these things kind of build on each other until you become in people's mind like a default in a positive way, right? It's like if you want these good answers, you go to Map My Apple or whatever it may be.
Yes. I mean, you are very right. Like my experience, I mean, our experience working for, I mean, 2 years now with the product on the market, it was, you cannot get the trust immediately, like, especially if it's new product and especially in apple growing. I mean, apples are very interesting also from the seasonality effect. So you have like on the north hemisphere from March, depends on the countries, but from March, let's say to October, and then you have like the winter, and how you also how you are solving this kind of problem when you need to onboard the same users next year. So from what we found very interesting was like, okay, if we push people from the very beginning, like, okay, pay because this is good, this will not work. I mean, I honestly, we tried in the beginning and we failed. I mean, it didn't work. Like, okay, you can get some subscriptions, but this is still not like proof of concept that your algorithm, your automation, your predictions, your AI is okay. It's not okay. So, I mean, 15 people telling you it's okay, this is not okay. You need like more people to tell you. So the first year was for us, okay, let's reach as many users as we can. Like, what are the countries that we can work on the north and the southern part of the world? So on the north, very interesting. Okay, we are from Serbia originally, so I know the language. For us, it's very easily to work in Serbia, but also US, very interesting in terms of the size of the market, the biggest one, and also in North Hemisphere after China, working in US, definitely interesting. We want to I mean, the end market is US, and then southern hemisphere Brazil. So we needed to adjust a little bit how we discuss what is the narratives for different kind of countries because of the culture effect, and also how people are doing growing, because doing in US in New York is not the same as doing in Serbia, and the mindset of people is, I mean, we were discussing now, definitely kind of different. So we said, okay, let's reach as many users to get as many feedback and to get as many data, so this algorithm can definitely be very good in globally. One day is in everybody's hands. So you now can use the algorithm in Brazil in the same way, like in Turkey. It's adjusted in terms of regulations, recommendations, etc. So it's optimal algorithm that any apple grower around the world can use. And this is the goal that we wanted, not just to put the traction in terms of revenue. So currently in the app, we have, I mean, more than 5,000 hectares just in apples in Serbia that people are put the parcels in, like that they are managing apples, their orchards in Serbia. I mean, this is like for us very good because we have a lot of data that we can operate with and create better recommendations for growers at the end.
No, that all makes a huge amount of sense. And in terms of like what are next steps? What are the kind of goals of the next year or two?
I mean, I have a lot of ideas, definitely, but I mean, in terms of Map My Apple, I would like to push with, I mean, agronomy consultants. So I would like to see, for me, is this is like in banking, like you're going to the bank and they explain you how to use, for example, banking app, mobile banking. You're not going to the software company that actually developed the mobile banking app. So agronomy consultants is something that is very interesting to work with. I mean, in parallel with the growers, and I would like to, I mean, my goal and our goal for the company definitely for this year is to test how we can connect those two sides of the same coin. So agronomy consultants and the apple growers. So the apple growers can have, I mean, if they can choose if they want their agronomy consultants or they want the automated recommendations, or they can, I mean, choose the agronomy consultant in terms of how to connect those two consumer segments. That is very interesting, I mean, for us, I mean, to test to see how the market reacts. This is what we are working on in terms of Map My Apple for growers. I would say in I mean, this year definitely focused on Apple still, but I would like to start thinking about grapes. This is very interesting, similar kind of pests and disease, very similar kind of problems, and this is good market. I mean, everywhere in the world, grapes and pears. can be very easily roll out. The models that we developed can be easily roll out on those kind of fruits, grapes and pears. And if we get the right, let's say, if we put the right moves on the market, definitely I would try with this one.
And when you say grapes, you mean both table grapes and wine grapes?
Yes.
Because wine grapes definitely have good margins. So.
Yes, definitely. But for example, what is interesting is that the amount of data is definitely bigger for example, for grapes than that you need in terms to develop something like automated recommendations. But we developed a lot, and for grapes, we need just a little adjustment. So, I mean, I'm speaking in months, like month 2 or 3 of development to try to have the product for grapes. But as I mentioned, like if we get the right moves on the market with Map My Apple, with investment, etc., I mean, this will come in the future. But still, I would like to be focused on apples to push Map My Apple with all the features and all the benefits. So to gain even more and more, to gather a lot of data to have a good business case. Let's say, so one day you can have, okay, now I have 10,000 growers, and this is definitely something that can help you, like, to have trust.
Fantastic. David, this has been great. Is there anything I should have asked you about but did not?
No, I mean, I like your podcast about the clean tech technology. I like the idea about this one. Definitely, I mean, I would like to see more of this. I was listening, I mean, a lot of your episodes. I found very similar, I mean, ideas and people working in agriculture, which I definitely would like to meet and discuss further. I'm definitely grateful for the opportunity to discuss with you. And for me, this is like a very good thing. And thank you very much. This is definitely something I will remember. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, one of the things we've been trying to do more is originally we were talking to tons of people, particularly based in the United States. But for the ag side and the food side, like the States is where everybody ends up. But
Yes.
there's so many interesting products being developed outside the United States, and then they end up kind of moving in to the US. And so there's like these very interesting perspectives, and trying to start a startup, getting a sense of how you can make that transfer from your home country into a bigger market, I think is really fascinating. So
yes. This is different kind of issues that are rising, like with scaling, etc. But yeah, I mean, definitely something that everybody works on, who is working with startups and the company and the business.
David, really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks very much.
Yep. Thank you very much.